Following on from our box making instructions, we get to the second most important part of a beehive, or I think it's really the most important part, is your bee frames. Again, can't stress enough to beginners, your decision that you make on your boxes decides with your frames. That's a full depth frame. This is just for example, this is called a WSP, which is 3/4 of a frame, and the WSP stands for William Stanley Pender, who made a hive that size. So that's neither one nor the other, but it's a bit lighter to carry, and this is the ideal. These are the two frames that I advise people, full depth and ideal. Now, when you buy your frames, they come in packets, I think, of 25, enough for 25. So, they're your end bars, these are your bottom bars, and these are your top bars. You need to put eyelets in. This is purposely a tight lid because if it pulls apart and you spill all them eyelets, they're very hard to pick up. So when you buy your frames, while they're still in the bundle, you need to insert your eyelets into them. And it's not one size fits all, because of the size of the hole the manufacturers drill. Just give them a tap to seat them. Now I find the best thing to do when you're putting your frames together is to do 4 at a time. So you assemble them with the eyelets out, line them up. I find it's best to use Bondcrete as your glue because it's waterproof. Put a little bit of glue along the glue line, and I use the end of a hacksaw blade as the spreader. Get your bottom bar ready, your top bar. Put your glue, spread it down the middle. Get your spreader and just work it backwards and forwards, and that also works it up the sides. Turn it over. Do the same with the bottom half. A generous line of glue. Spread it. Then you just fit them onto the frame. Fit your bottom bar on the top into the grooves. That just squares it up. Now, the nails you use in bee frames are cement coated nails, and you'll see they're very fine because the wood's fine. The cement coating grips them. You put 2 nails in bottom nails are slightly smaller. The top carries all the weight and the stresses and strains. The bottom is just to keep the frame square. So the nails don't need to be as long, and hardly ever do you have any trouble with bottom bars. It's always your top bar that's the problem. When you've nailed it together, just look at it, see that it's in square. If it's not, now's the time to square it up, and there's a frame ready to be wired. So this is the same principle that you use, whether it be whatever size frame you're using, whether it be ideal, full depth, it's still the same. The same nails you use in the top, the same nails you use in the bottom. That gives you a really good serviceable frame that'll take years of use. The only thing that wears these down is moisture inside the hive, and it tends to rot the lugs. On to the next step, which is wiring your frame. Wiring it makes or breaks your frame. So these little nails I'm hammering here, these are what they sell at the bee produce manufacturers as tacks. So you part drive them in. This is the stainless steel wire. You put your frame in, you bow your end bar in. That straightens your frame up and holds it tight for you to put the wire through. You just guesstimate how much wire you need for 4. Sometimes you think that it's going to be easy to put this wire through, but it catches the side of the eyelet. You don't necessarily need a wiring board to wire bee frames, but as you can see, this stainless steel wire is very springy. If you lose control of it, it springs all over the place. It knots very easy, and when it knots, it'll snap. So then you've got to cut. A little bit more. Do it about 3 turns around your tack. Hammer your tack hard. Grab hold of the wire and snap it off. And it's just a matter of tightening these wires up. If you grab hold of the wire, pull it, and you use the frame to pull against the wire to tighten it. You give it a clink to get the tension right. Give it the 3 winds around. hammer the tack home. Cut that off and then cut that off the wire so it's ready for the next one. When you let that off, beautiful. It's ready for the next step now, which is embedding your foundation. So you can see what using the right stainless steel wire, the tension that you need to have, because the weight of brood or honey, that's what supports it. And on a really hot day, when inside the hive the temperatures are high, if that's not really tight, it allows the wax to sag, and when it sags it changes your foundation from worker cell to drone cell, and you need to limit the number of drones in your hive because drones are a predisposing factor to causing bees to want to swarm in the springtime. So the idea for a beekeeper is to minimise the number of drones in a hive unless you're a queen breeder and you want drones. But if you're just working a hive in your backyard, you don't want drones. So that's wiring. Now we'll get set up to show you the next step, which is embedding your foundation. After you've put the wire in and you've wired up your frames, and the time comes when you need to put in foundation for your bees to work, it's not a good idea to put foundation in and leave the frame sitting for weeks on a time at a time. So when you think, oh, I need frames and I've got them all ready, because you'll find unless you do it properly, they'll be all buckly, and you can pull all the foundation out and then put some new stuff in. So you don't actually put the foundation in until your bees actually need it. So the idea is when you're embedding foundation, and the tip is to embed your foundation after the foundation has expanded. So you need to take, see, and that's rather rigid, you lay it on your wire and then feed it into your groove, slide it backwards and forwards so it seats home, and then looking to see the gap, the spaces around it are all equal. Then holding the frame, the foundation against the wires, you put it on your embedding board. You can move it to get it straightened up. For your electric embedder, you can either use a 12-volt battery with 2 probes. You can buy these probes from Jaycar, or you can buy a electric embedder. So the idea is you put that on your wire, and this side has got your switch, and you just heat it enough, watching that hot wire melt into your foundation till it melts into about the middle. It takes a little bit of getting used to. It's better to underdo it than to overdo it, because if you overdo it, you just melt the wire straight through the foundation, and then that sheet of foundation is no good because you can't join it back together again. But that's how quick and easy it is. You just put it on, get it all lined up, touch it, and you can see it get hot, you can see it melt into the foundation. What I was meaning with this, how you can do this, it's just a matter of touching this on one end of the wire and this on the other end. And there you go. So there's your foundation, melted into the wax. It's strong. Then the bees will hang off this edge of this top bar down in a living lace, and that's how they draw that hexagonal pattern. You have a bee's head all the way along, and then in between there's bees hanging off the back legs, so that's where the next line comes, because the head's in the middle. They make the wax, they spike it, put in their mandibles, chew it, and they call it drawing the foundation, but they don't actually draw the foundation out, they add on to it. And that's how they end up making that beautiful comb that bees make. And these cells are worker cells. So that's why they make it in workers, so you can limit the amount of drones. And if bees make drone cells, which they usually will around the edges, and you don't want them, well, you can cut the heads off the drones, because they take 25 days to from the time the eggs laid until they hatch out. And if you're visiting and looking at your bees at least once a fortnight, you can cut the heads off them, the bees will pull the bodies out, clean the cells, the queen will lay, you come along in another fortnight and cut the heads off. So you can limit the amount of drones you have by doing that process. But if they sometimes will draw down comb and wreck it all to make drone comb. Well, if they do that, the only thing you can do is to work that into your honey super, and then after, when you extract the honey out of it, then cut the comb out, melt it down, and put a new sheet of foundation in and get them to draw it again. To get the frames of wax expanded, the idea is you make 3 or 4 frames and you put the wax into 3 or 4 and stand them where the sun is going to get on them, and leave them in the sun long enough that this becomes all sloppy. You know, you can't hold it and it's not straight, because it's the heat, it's very malleable, pliable, and that's when you need to embed it, because it's expanded. And when you melt those wires into it and it cools down, it shrinks. But it can shrink all right, it won't pull out of the wires, and that's why if you embed cold foundation, when it expands, the wires are fixed and it'll pull out of the foundation or split it. So that's the idea of spending the time to get your sheets of foundation, put them in like I showed you, and then stand them up against a wall or a garage door or something with the sun shining on them, and it's just a matter of finding out how much time with the heat of the sun. But I find, for me, usually if I do 4 frames, by the time I've got the 4th frame against the wall, I can start and embed the 1st frame. Then I'll put another frame down and then embed the 2nd frame. Then put another frame down and then embed the 3rd frame, put another frame down and do the 4th frame, and by the time you've done the 4th frame you can come back and do the 1st frame. So it's just a matter of finding out how hot the sun is, how long you've got to leave it for it to expand and get pliable. So if you never learn anything else except to embed expanded foundation, it'll save you heaps of heartache with buckles, because if you embed cold foundation and the bees don't draw it straight away, expansion and contraction, and then it looks like waves of the ocean. It's all ripple, and the bees can't draw it with a straight midrib. And then when the bees either put honey in it and you go to uncap it, you find you're cutting into the middle, because the middle's out where the outside should be. So that's the tip on embedding foundation.